welcome to the Mandela Effect. Today's topic just goes to show you that video suggestions can come by way of your comments that may have not been a suggestion at all. In one of my recent videos, a viewer by the name of Cam Good briefly mentioned the Mandela Effect phenomenon, and it quickly led me down the rabbit hole of realizing what video I had to do this week. Do you remember something happening or objects being a certain way, but in fact, all evidence states that memory is wrong? You may be experiencing this strange psychological enigma. So, let's look into what this effect is, a few examples of things not being right, and more importantly, try to find some answers as to why it occurs. Before I start, I wanted to tell you that while I have never mentioned anything about the last animated image I use in my videos, I highly suggest you stay to the end to try this one out, as it's super mind-blowing. I have done it 3 times and kept checking to see if things were amiss, but they weren't. The term Mandela Effect was first coined around 2010 by a paranormal author by the name of Fiona Broome. As the name implies, it was a reference to Nelson Mandela, the former president of South Africa. I will get to what this reference is more in line with shortly. The effect is basically the shared memories of an event taking place, or items being named a certain way, when in fact they never happened or existed under a certain moniker. What makes this fascinating is that these memories are shared by many people around the world who have never had contact with each other. In psychology, this is frequently called a collective memory. For some unapparent reason, without an outside force causing these ideas to spring up, people seem to believe information is true even when facts say otherwise. As mentioned, the effect was given its name due to a conversation revolving around many individuals recalling that Nelson Mandela had died in prison in the 1980s, while it is widely reported that he didn't pass away until December 5, 2013, at his home. This simple conversation paved the way for this strange phenomenon, where many people believe this event happened, but yet facts say otherwise. What makes it more interesting is that there are claims that there are old textbooks around supporting the early death idea. Once the Mandela Effect became more prominent, more and more instances were brought forward to prove that Nelson Mandela wasn't the only case of this phenomenon existing. At this point, I want to talk about a few examples of this. One of the most mind-blowing ones for me was the fact that Fruit Loops isn't spelled like fruit, but fruit with 2 O's. Many of us grew up knowing it was spelled like how fruit is supposed to look, but according to the company's history, it supposedly has always been spelled with 2 O's. The book by Anne Rice, and later adapted to film in 1994, Interview with a Vampire, supposedly never really existed. Even if you were to type in the words in Google search, interview with, it will fill it in with a vampire. However, if you look at the results, it was actually called Interview with the Vampire. The popular fast food restaurant we all know as Chick-fil-A isn't an actual business. The name that it has claimed to always be, and it has always been on the sign, is Chick-fil-A. The popular child's TV series, The Flintstones, have not been safe from this phenomenon, as people have reported that the name has changed multiple times from Flintstones to Flintstones, and back to Flintstones currently. Again, Hanna-Barbera claims no changes have ever been made. Some people have taken to keeping track of changes in names, and even though the item's history says there never has been a change, they do have proof of this being false. One such thing is the popular children's book series entitled The Berenstain Bears, but apparently it is something that no one has ever read. According to its creators, it is and has always been spelled Berenstain. Evidence is provided by even the authors' names that were actually Stan and Jan Berenstain. The issue with this one is that evidence has surfaced to show this name has changed. I will stop with the examples there for the sake of time, but look into Oscar Mayer not being spelled like that, or even the biggest mind-blowing revelation that at the end of Queen's popular song We Are the Champions, he doesn't ever end it with of the world, as you may remember. Go ahead, look it up. I know I did immediately. Okay, with all that provided, you may be thinking that this is all interesting, But how does it fit in with the paranormal channel? I'm glad you asked that question, as some of the explanations behind why this effect exists fits in fairly well. Many theories abound about this type of thing occurring due to our overlapping with parallel dimensions. This links with the very intriguing idea that right now there are multiple forms of ourselves all in a different dimension doing the same or different actions at us at this very moment. The idea is that somehow we mixed with another dimension at one point, and their version of Fruit Loops is spelled with two O's, but we still remember our own being spelled like fruit. It goes as far as thinking that all the times our world was predicted to end, that it in fact did, but rather than being destroyed, we just merged with another dimension. What makes this interesting to think about is, how often do people tend to find out that there are other people out there who are unrelated but look exactly the same? A form of doppelganger, if you will, minus the wanting to take over your life part. I think the most fascinating idea is sort of tied with the butterfly effect when dealing with this topic. For those unfamiliar, the butterfly effect is basically the theory that the smallest thing, like a butterfly flapping its wings, can cause a massive change elsewhere, like a tornado. For this purpose, some speculate that we have been visited by time travelers, and their small impacts may have changed things for everyone on Earth that we know. I love this theory, but at the same time, many of you know my issues with time travel. Not only that, but I would also assume if this was actually happening, then no evidence would be able to be found of the change. This sort of thing goes into the theory of, if you went back in time and killed your grandfather, would you still exist? But I don't want to get into that one here. So, what answers do we have to support or deny this phenomenon as being real or not? In scientific studies, the collective memory has been looked into, and many times is ruled out as simply the power of suggestion. This goes hand in hand with the idea of misinterpreting lyrics or hearing a line in a movie the wrong way. After a while of hearing people repeat the same words, you start to believe that that is how it was always said. With the Fruit Loops example, how many of us would have assumed anything was wrong with how it was spelled if we just saw the box with no explanation pointing out the two O's? This also could be spread along based on misinformation. If I was having a conversation with someone about Nelson Mandela, and they said about him dying in prison in the 1980s, and I'm not knowing much about those details, might agree, and later spread that as fact onto other people, who then would do the same thing. The problem with those explanations is that so many people who have never met or are continents apart all have the same memory. This is troublesome for explaining it away as misinformation. Going a step farther, due to the fact that some evidence has been provided showing the changes, it makes it harder to say it never existed, as we may have remembered. Not to get you more worried, but as of late, scientists have postulated that multiverses do in fact exist in bubbles of space. An interesting theory that delves into this is called the eternal chaotic inflation, which was first hypothesized by Andre Lind in 1986. But again, I won't get into that here. As I close out this week's video, I'd be interested in hearing your opinions on the Mandela Effect. Is this just an example of the power of suggestion, or are we actually switching between realities without knowing it? Before I go, I wanted to take this moment and mention something that I felt was important. As you may have been aware, I've become fairly active on YouTube's creator community, and while there, I came across an article posted by a guy who goes by the name of GoingFullNerd. He has been getting hit hard with the recent demonetization bug that is infecting YouTube. His channel is about reviewing movies, TV shows, and just about everything else, with a strong emphasis mainly on superheroes. I personally checked out his channel, and everything he does looks fantastic, but at only a little over 1,000 subs, he seriously needs our help. I will leave his channel link in the description, and would greatly appreciate it if you could show him some of the Cryptid family love. Another thing I wanted to touch on was that with my recent YouTube Hates the Paranormal video, many of you have asked me to create a Patreon page. I have mentioned it before, but I have had one for a while now, but we'll leave the link to it in the description as well. Okay, with all that out of the way, if you are new to my channel and enjoyed what you saw, please consider clicking that subscribe button. Also, if you enjoyed it a lot, please hit that thumbs up as well. With that, be safe, and I'll see you in the next one. Later.